with a whole lot of truth. Remedy Revolution is here for you. Ooh. And now here's your host, Erin Page.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Remedy Revolution podcast. My name is Erin, and I'm really excited today. I have two ladies here who I've been following for a really long time. I've met them in person a few times as well. They are very, very integral to what's going on policy-wise when it comes to the state of Texas, but really when it comes to the entire nation, because so many of the things that they've been instrumental in integrating into Texas policy have then followed in other states as well. So I am very excited today to welcome Michelle Evans and Rebecca Hardy. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having us.
All right, so Texans for Vaccine Choice is the organization that you both are very instrumental with, and I'd love to hear a little bit about your stories. What made you want to be involved in this conversation about medical freedom, and why did you get involved when it comes to policy?
I'll probably speak for the both of us and say that we didn't want to get involved. The movement wanted us. We didn't want the movement necessarily, but in 2015, in February of that year, a Dallas Republican lawmaker named Jason Villalba filed House Bill 2006, which would have removed the option for parents to exempt their children for reasons of conscience from public school required vaccines, which would have directly impacted myself and Rebecca, in that we exercised this right in order for our children to attend public school at the time. And so this is 10 years ago, so we didn't have Zoom or anything like that. It was just like three-way conversations on cell phones, and phones started firing up across the state with what we were termed at the time as warrior moms. Many of us in the Austin area, but many also in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, trying to figure out, like, how do we kill this? How do we keep this from happening? So Rebecca came on early to really exercise her talents, which are more in the organizational side. And I was kind of the face of Texans for Vaccine Choice, this fledgling ad hoc organization, doing the advocacy at the Capitol. So communicating directly with lawmakers and testifying, et cetera.
Yeah, so, a lot of these conversations were happening in California, where I'm from, obviously. And so a lot of that initial pushback from so many parents in California anyway was regarding first the philosophical exemption, and then they went after medical exemptions, even though they kept telling us that medical exemptions would be protected. They kind of worked around that in the state of California, for those of you listening who aren't familiar with what happened. But essentially, they told doctors that they would be severely restricted from writing these medical exemptions, and essentially limited them to, I think it was 5 per year. And unfortunately, what that meant is the very few doctors who were writing those medical exemptions then could no longer do so because they risked losing their license by writing them. So it really did spark a huge movement in the state of California. And I know that a lot of people now have since come to Texas because of some of the things that have happened in California. So tell us a little bit about where we're at now in the state of Texas, and speaking in a more broad sense, how can we implement some of the things that we've got going here in other states around the country?
Well, let's talk about where we are as the state of Texas when it comes to vaccine mandates and exemptions. So I would say that, for daycare, preschool, Mother's Day out, exemptions are accepted pretty much universally. For public and charter school students, exemptions are pretty much universally accepted. And the same can be said for our higher education students. Whatever, if it's a 4-year, 2-year, junior college, community college, or if it's private or public university, whatever, if it's classified as a higher education campus, then you as well are also covered for any sort of enrollment vaccine recommendations. We also have some fairly strong protections in our family codes and in our government codes that protect families from CPS overreach in the realm of vaccine choices and vaccine exemptions. In addition, we have ensured that your vaccination status is irrelevant when it comes to any sort of state services. So be it WIC or SNAP or Medicaid or CHIP, any of those are also safeguarded for parental rights. And in fact, we extended that in the 2023 legislative session. We passed a very significant, protection where those Medicaid and CHIP funded doctors can no longer discriminate on their Medicaid and CHIP patients based on vaccination status. So we are incrementally really not just holding the line, but advancing the line in Texas. If I had to say like where our next big challenge or hurdle is, it is protecting our healthcare workers and our medical, our human and animal health students. Those are pretty much the only Texans that are still under mandates with very limited options for exemptions. It's a very much so a facility by facility policy that they are fully empowered to adopt. And many simply just say, we're not accepting exemptions, you comply or you are not employed by us. And so that is really probably the biggest, what I would call stain on our state, that kind of discrimination is still allowed. But we also have, just general things that are happening that should be, I don't know if we want to say they should be illegal, but they are definitely classified as unethical. Just last year, we were dealing with a school district in Texas, Leander ISD. They published every child's name with an exemption on the cafeteria screen saying you need to get your paperwork in. These kind of medical privacy invasions or violations probably is a better word that still happen. We have school districts every summer and fall completely misleading parents into what the vaccine requirements actually are for enrollment in Texas. And, we just believe these school districts always make a big deal about how they partner with parents, but yet when it comes to this, they don't share all of the information about their rights with their district parents, right? So maybe that was more than what you were asking for, but that's like the lay of the land in Texas. We have done a really good job of, keeping this conversation in the forefront of public discourse, I would say. We have teams all over the state doing this work to ensure that people don't just forget. Michelle mentioned that we launched 10 and a half years ago before COVID was even a word anybody knew, right? So, but we have a lot of new people to the movement because of the massive spotlight that COVID shined on big pharma and government corruption and overreach and all the things, right? But we can't let people forget what happened, and that's what we are intent on doing.
Yeah, it's interesting because I, for one, had to attend a school board meeting to discuss mandated masks, for example, for my niece and nephew who were attending school. And the amount of pushback was absolutely insane from, the district. And that's a whole other conversation about what happened in Round Rock. But ultimately, I think what happened with COVID, and I view it now as a more positive thing, but it really pushed this conversation to the forefront. So I'm interested to hear, what was that like at Texans for Vaccine Choice, really being thrust into the spotlight because of that particular event?
Well, I had actually stepped back from TFVC in 2016, and it was COVID that reignited my political flame. So I also have the pleasure of residing in Round Rock ISD, and the masking wars here really lit a fire under me to get involved politically again. And so once I returned to Texans for Vaccine Choice, it was a whole new level, a whole new atmosphere, where we were having these hushed conversations in private offices with lawmakers, very few of whom were ready, willing, and able to speak boldly on this subject. Suddenly, we were accepted with open arms for the most part in 2023. People were ready to listen to us and to put our policy wishes into action. So that's been a real boon for us, and for Texas generally. But I maintain that had Texans for Vaccine Choice not formed in 2015, our state would be in a much worse position than it was in 2020 and 2021.
100%. I agree. And, just to reiterate, for the first, 8 years, we were primarily on the defense. We were kind of hoping for a parent-friendly amendment on a bill here or there, but mainly we were working to kill bad bills. To date, we have killed 60 bad bills. We have a perfect kill rate of every bad bill that would infringe on Texans' right to informed consent, vaccine choice, medical privacy, right? Which is an incredible track record. But it wasn't until COVID was, I would say, firmly in the rear view in that 2023 session where we were able to actually get protective legislation, these standalone vaccine choice bills, fully over the finish line. And, let's be very clear. I don't wish the COVID response on anyone, but if people like you, Erin, and if organizations like TFVC can help redeem some of the evil we all saw, then, I say, here we are, use us, right? And so, it's kind of this weird thing where like, it's horrible that all of that happened, but yet the only choice we have available is to just find the good in it and find something to redeem. And I would
Yeah.
say we have. I mean, we're finally getting some really great bills and protections over the finish line. And like Michelle said, instead of these little whispered conversations in the dark hallways of the Capitol back in 2015, we have, just at our rally in February, we had like 40 legislators show up to be introduced. And that wasn't even everybody that was invited. That was just the people that could make it at the last minute, So it's a pretty big, success story here that we have mainstreamed this conversation.
Yeah, so you mentioned, defensively having to kill a number of bills. What kinds of bills were being introduced, and what kinds of things do you foresee might be coming down the pipeline in the future?
So some of them have been, minor kills, like roadkill, that were just small things that, a change in language from opt-in to opt-out for the immunization database, for example. And some of them were big wholesale bills, like the Ebola bill in 2015. I think it was SB 538 or something like that, that basically said, like, in the event of an outbreak or emergency, the Department of State Health Services can come to your home if they know that you're not vaccinated, and they can quarantine you, detain you and your family members until the epidemic is over, essentially. I mean, it was just like rounding people up. And eventually that kind of did happen, but um, we go through at the beginning of every single legislative session, and we're just looking for any bill that mentions immunizations, vaccinations, masks. I mean, it's this process of looking for these needles in a haystack just to make sure that we're not missing anything, even as minor as just one word change.
What kind of tactics are they using to push some of this legislation? Are there riders on certain bills that seem like they're completely unrelated, for example?
They did have that going in the early years. I think that they kind of understood now that it doesn't work because we're vigilant, and we have insiders at the Capitol who are more than happy to sound the alarm if something pops up.
And they also will, email us or send us screenshots or photos of the handouts they're dropping off. And so we are able to quickly respond to those. And I mean, if I can just toot our own horn, not that we do that often around here, but, I just remember this committee hearing. It was a marathon hearing day where we were hearing, I don't know if it was 8 bills in one day, which is insane, but also we love it because it's like, you're going to hear these bills, whether it's over the course of 2 months or one day, we might as well just rip that Band-Aid, right? And I remember, the other side bringing their people. And I remember thinking, if this is their best, then like, we got this. Like, I mean, we just ran the table all day. It's almost like they know their bills are DOA and they can't compete. I mean, there was this one day where, I mean, we had the entire Senate floor just like lined up with 20 some odd witnesses ready to tackle any kind of opposing point that they presented, and we did so very well.
I think a lot of people who may be new to this conversation perhaps entered it, with COVID or, after a vaccine injury with the COVID vaccines, versus those of us who have, been at the table for a much longer period of time. I think a lot of the arguments made are really made based upon this kind of religiosity when it comes to vaccines. And we've spoken about that a lot on the podcast previously, but it's this vehement, mantra of safe and effective. And, oh, what about polio? And all of these conversations that, you know, I've had with various doctors, and we've debunked all of those kinds of things. But there's also the policy side of this because, like Michelle mentioned, they actually did pass a bill in California that was very similar, essentially allowing the public health department to enter your home, put you on a list, all of those kinds of things if they knew that you were not vaccinated during a state of emergency. And so there's very real conversations that I think are now happening that weren't happening previously. So when people are new to this conversation and they hear the arguments, okay, well, vaccines are safe and effective. Why do we need all of this policy, in order to protect people? What would you say to somebody who's giving you those kinds of arguments?
Typically, I don't engage anymore. I've learned that lesson a long time ago. We just stand in what is true, which is that we have this right. It is a right that was given to us by our creator, and that right is not relative to time, space, outbreak, any of that. So I've always based our arguments in liberty. And
Mhm.
whenever people veer off into science and whataboutism, it's just kind of, let's get this back to what is undeniable, which is liberty. You have the right to believe in whatever science you want to believe in. You have the right to not even ground your beliefs in science at all. You can ground it in religion, or you can ground it in nothing and just, this is what I feel. So I tend to not get, because it is, like you said, it is like trying to get somebody to let go of their faith. And that is very hard. And it's something that doesn't happen overnight. One good argument is not going to turn a person from a very pro-mandate person to, our side. So we just kind of let the truth get out little by little, and eventually people come to us.
Yeah, and maybe we need to back up just a little bit to explain exactly what Texans for Vaccine Choice, what our mission is. And our mission is just to protect and advance informed consent, medical privacy, and vaccine choice. And the beauty of that is, we don't really have to always have these super science-y grounded arguments, because it really is a liberty argument. If I say you cannot vaccinate, I am no better than the person that says you must. And, It really is freeing because we can just stay in that lane of this is a liberty issue. And this, like I always say, we're fighting for even the people that hate us. And because medical liberty really is for everybody. And I hope and pray that people that come to this movement are not coming because of some adverse reaction. The unfortunate reality is that that's typically what happens, and it's the most unpleasant, like, I told you so, or but still we welcome you with arms wide open. Come, this is like Michelle said, this is the movement nobody wants to be a part of, right? But it requires constant vigilance because all of these rights are just one election or one bill away from being undone.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean that we don't provide education and resources when appropriate. We do have a vast wealth of information on our website. When I go to hearings, if a legislator is asking for links or resources, then I'm happy to provide that to them. But it's always, I try to be consistent, like regardless of whatever science you're using, because science is never settled,
Mhm.
the liberty always stays around.
That's right.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point because I know, for example, in California, things really fell apart when people began ideologically arguing when it came to the importance or the unimportance of vaccines and what roles they played. Um, there was one organization that I was involved with where the conversations really centered on the freedom argument versus the, safe and effective blah 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 scientific types of arguments that really in my mind had no place being there because it doesn't matter. The point is we're talking about medical autonomy and the idea of being able to make decisions and choices for yourself and your family members as appropriate for yourself and your family members. So I do really appreciate that approach. And I think it's so important because even now, people that are new to the conversation are advocating for things like, oh, we have to eradicate the COVID vaccine, for example. Those kinds of conversations um, present a much bigger challenge versus just saying, okay, we're going to fight for the choice to take a vaccine or to not take a vaccine. And so I think that that's where some of the medical freedom movement really kind of fractures and splinters apart. But when you look at Texans for Vaccine Choice and your commitment to really focusing and honing in on the freedom aspect of this particular medical intervention, I think that's a really, really important point that I just kind of want to drive home to our listeners. Um, so I appreciate that.
Centered on the issue and narrowly focused on that, which leads us to success.
Yeah, 100%. So, something that really came up as very surprising in the conversations happening in California were things surrounding political parties. And I know that this is kind of a difficult topic. Sometimes it's a sensitive topic, but people were very surprised in California, for example, to realize that the people who were supporting the push for vaccine mandates or restrictions on exemptions were primarily of one particular political persuasion, and that those who were arguing for freedom, medical freedom, were of another political persuasion. And most people were very surprised by that. Someone like myself, for example, who marched against Monsanto because I didn't like what they were doing. I also recognized that we had a need for medical freedom, and so. But somehow these conversations all got lumped into the same bucket, if you will, of causes for the Democratic Party, which I found very, very strange and interesting. So tell me a little bit about your experience with that here in Texas. What kinds of um, difficulties did you encounter in speaking to various legislators of certain political parties?
It was equally surprising for me. I kind of always assumed like crunchy moms, hippie movement, anti-pharma kind of stuff fit neatly in Democrat politics, and it turns out to be the complete opposite. Now, there were a handful of Democrat legislators in those early years who would give me, time and listen to our stories, my story, and stories of mothers who came to the Capitol with me. But then they would turn around after showing such deep empathy and seeming very sincere, they would turn around and vote against these moms consistently. So it was almost immediate that we noticed there's a huge distinction between the two parties, and where one, the Republican Party or Republican lawmakers were very much of the mindset that like I support your right to homeschool, I support your right to discipline your child the way you want, and I support your right to make medical decisions for your child without consequence. That was very much so the Republican side, and to this day, we just cannot. In fact, it's gotten even worse. The divide, the tribalism has gotten even worse in the state capitol. Whereas like 2023, a couple of Democrat legislators maybe scored a D or maybe a C minus on our session report card. Every one of them scored an F this session. So they've dug in.
And it's really shocking. And I echo what you've said, Erin, with the partisanship of this. I mean, we fully see this as a human rights issue. This, vaccine injury knows no party, knows no race, gender, socioeconomic status, lifestyle. I mean, it is a universal experience. So why the Democrats just don't seem to have ears to hear this. It's unfortunate. And let's be clear, like I'm not aging anybody on this call, but the Democrat Party of, say, our parents, that was the party that was speaking out against corporate capture, speaking out against big pharma. And somewhere along the way, it's just completely reversed. And it's a head scratcher to me as far as just how just quintessentially nonpartisan this issue should be. And we get accused of, drawing the battle lines. And I'm like, it wasn't us. It was the Democrats. The Democrats drew this line. It wasn't us.
Yeah, the conservatives are definitely now the anti-establishment wing. So it's very odd to me to go from, like the 1960s anti-war hippie Democrat, like free love movement to like pro big pharma, trust your government, trust the science, that kind of thing. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I don't know that I'll ever fully understand it, other than the only thing that I can potentially point to is really financial interests. I don't know. And of course, loyalty to the party, but I feel like that was enhanced by what I presume to be financial interests. Have you seen that to be the case? For example, we know that across the aisle, there are both parties, legislators in both parties who are beholden to some of their lobbyists who have paid them substantial sums, for example. So, when you look at for a Republican Congress member, if they have been in the pockets of big pharma, do you notice that there is less of a willingness to go along with the party?
At the state level, it hasn't really been an issue.
Hmm.
Pfizer and organizations like that will give money to anybody and just
Hmm.
see what sticks. So there's not like a very straight correlation between accepting a check from Pfizer and voting for mandates, for example.
Mhm.
It just isn't as pronounced at this level. Um,
And the checks they're writing are, four figures. They're not these like ginormous numbers that we're seeing at the federal level either.
Sure.
it really is like we've talked about already. It is a faith. It is a religion. Like this is not, I think that most of these Democrat lawmakers come to this very genuinely, very sincerely. They fully believe what they're told and they fully believe what they say.
Mhm.
You have somebody like Ann Johnson who represents the medical district. And so, of course, representing that area, she is constantly barraged, with hospital administrators and doctors coming to her and saying, like, please, lobby for our pet issues at the Capitol. And it's sort of her job to do so because that is her district, right? But I do feel like she truly believes in the cause. And she is one of the strongest defenders of mandates.
Hmm. So
And
how do
posing like she hates this idea that your vaccine status should be, private protected information too. She loves these. Oh, that was one bill that I wanted to mention when you said what are some of the bad bills? It's those
Mm,
campus reporting bills where they want to release these exemption numbers either by campus, or even we've had some bills that we've killed in the past that would release exemption numbers by classroom. I mean, these are just the most absurd bills and we've killed them all, like I said, but she just hates the idea that your vaccination status should be um not her business.
mm. Yeah, the argument of public health, I guess, and those in the public health arena is a very strong one. They're obviously well funded. They have messaging that has been very strong for a long time. So, kind of overcoming that, I see as a big hurdle in bridging the gap and reaching across the aisle and speaking to the Democratic legislators who will actually listen. Um, is there one particular issue that you feel like might open their ears a little bit more?
The bridge issue this session was Shelley Luther's bill,
Mm,
which I think fell just shy, one vote shy of 2/3 of the House. So she got 99 votes, which means at least 13 Democrats moved across the aisle to vote for her bill. So that bill says that if you advertise vaccines in Texas, you assume full liability for any harm caused by that vaccine in Texas. So that corporate responsibility argument, I think, lands pretty well with Democrats. And we'll never, to be clear, we will never stop trying to have these conversations with them. I still go to Democrat lawmakers' offices every single day. We still have to interact with them on committees. They form, a large minority of these committee memberships. And we have to be able to have these conversations and not be caught completely off guard when they start holding our feet to the fire. And, you know, to be fair, Ann Johnson recognizes the work that we've done. I mean, she doesn't frame it as giving us credit so much as blaming us for things, but she's like, listen, you've been coming here for 10 years and you've advocated and you've made so many changes towards your side. And I mean, that's an important recognition that we at least have garnered some respect or, fear. I'm not sure which one it is, but I'm happy to have either.
Yeah. So, any advice for those states that maybe haven't had to go on the defense, but are looking forward and thinking about some of the offensive moves that they may need to make within their state? What would somebody who wanted to begin an organization like Texans for Vaccine Choice want to really hone in on and focus on if they wanted to grow something like that?
Michelle and I are looking at each other giggling because we were like, oh, this has been such a labor of love. If I would say one thing, I mean, I could say a lot of things here, but just to make it very clear, this is hard work. I mean, you can't just open up a Facebook page and think that that's any sort of actual advocacy. Is social media a necessary evil in this movement? Yes, but it is not advocacy. Sitting behind a keyboard, typing a comment on a Facebook post does not, policy does not make, right? And so
Right.
it requires pushing those sleeves up, a lot of shoe leather at your state capitol, at your, wherever the fight is in your state. You've got to go where the battle is. And it's not for the faint of heart, right? I mean, Michelle and I didn't wake up one day and say, let's take on big pharma, like it is a worthy mission. It is vital work, and it does pay off. And I'm not talking that, anybody's getting rich here, right? But it pays off in liberty, it pays off in successes, and it pays off in just knowing that you're fighting for something bigger than yourself.
And I don't have anything nearly as inspirational as that, but I will say two things. If you're going to get involved in this fight, find yourself a hero. Find somebody inside your state capitol who is willing to be on your team and to really have hard conversations on the floor, to do the hard work on your behalf when they get to the floor and in the back hallways of the Capitol. They're ready to do the dirty work for you. And read your statute. It is unpleasant. It is boring. It is cumbersome, but you really need to know where you're going to attack in order for you to be successful. If I didn't know Health and Safety Code 161.004 or Texas Education Code 38.001F, like I wouldn't be successful because I wouldn't be able to just spew that out and say, this is where we need to focus our energy and this is where changes need to be made. This is the code where we need to flip it from a may to a shall in order to allow for anybody to have an exemption at a healthcare facility. So that's very boring, but it is a necessity.
Finding your right team to coalesce around this issue is vital. I mean, Michelle eats statute for breakfast, like I love that she is this policy wonk, right? And then we've got our communications director who responds to the hundreds of emails we get every month from supporters and the public or media inquiries. I mean, we just have a tremendous team, and having like that trust and where everybody has a lane, but yet we're not afraid of wearing many hats if it comes to it. I mean, we're a little staff of 5 here at TFVC, which is just tremendous considering what we came from, this little ragtag group of just moms that didn't even know how a bill was passed. And now we've got a staff of 5 and have built an absolute, nationally recognized organization. And, it really has to do with the people that are on the team.
Yeah.
Okay, so one more question, because I've actually been asked this question multiple times, but how does one go about writing policy then, from, this is an idea that I have. I obviously need to put on all the research to make sure that it's, the idea is sound. But then once you're at that point, how do you go about writing policy and engaging with legislators to try to get that passed?
So as far as writing policy is concerned, I'll go back to like read the statute and
Yeah.
get that kind of language into your head. And any idea is a solid idea until it's not. So you're going to do a draft, just copy and paste the statute into a Google Doc and send that to a staffer that you know and trust. And in Texas, that has to go from a staffer or a legislator through Texas Leg Council, which is a group of attorneys who speak code.
Mhm.
And then they spit out a bill. And it's far simpler than than it seems like it should be. But the first, I'll have to go back to those first 2 steps, which is find yourself a hero in the
Yeah.
legislature that will team up with you and let you use their resources. Like you're establishing a relationship with that gatekeeping staffer or the chief of staff, and you're able to lean on them if you need to get something through Texas Ledge Council. And then just understanding where to look in code and what words you're looking for to either strike out or add. And I mean, it doesn't end in the bill filing process. It goes on throughout the entire, well, 24/7, 365 days a year. We're constantly looking at different ways to change policy because legislation is not the only way.
Hmm. Hmm.
Currently looking at, well, I'm not going to quote code, but the part of Texas Education Code, which basically says that the Department of State Health Services executive commissioner can exclude exempted students from schools during an epidemic or an emergency. But now that that commissioner has abdicated the responsibility to school superintendents, saying that they could do it even in the absence of an emergency or epidemic. So we've attacked that through litigation. We've
Hmm.
attacked that through requesting an attorney general's opinion because
Hmm.
the rules do not match the law. So there's not really a law that needs to change. It needs to be the implementation of the law. So we try many fronts.
Yeah, I think that's a hugely important point, right? Because policy is one way that one can advocate. Certainly, in the legal arena, there are warriors that are needed when it comes to enforcing the law. Of course, and then we've got people and in the medical community like myself who are trying to help these people after they've been injured, for example, by a product. So, but it really does take, people in all branches of this conversation to continue to advocate and assist, um, you know, everyone who is hopeful to maintain their freedoms. Particularly when we've seen what happened during COVID. And I hate going back and continuously talking about it, but it's absolutely necessary because if we are to avoid those kinds of mandates in the future, the conversation just needs to continuously be had. Otherwise, we just forget, right?
100%. I mean, I have the clarity that Texas was better off than the deep blue states during COVID, right? But I'm a sixth generation Texan, and what happened in Texas was the most un-Texas thing to have happened here. We were not immune to the mandates and the contact tracing and the censorship and all of the things, right? And so you're absolutely right. We have to, we can't let people forget. And that is why we've talked a lot about policy, right? And I love that because without, we could talk all day long about, how vaccines have harmed people, right? But without policy that allows me to say no, that's just, kind of yelling into the wind, right? And so that is why we launched our outreach program and brought on an outreach director whose entire job is to build this army of people that are trained, equipped, and empowered to go into their local communities and have these kind of tough conversations without them going sideways. These conversations that will build bridges and open minds and plant seeds. And because if we could wave our magic wand and pass any bill we want to do tomorrow, it doesn't change that hearts and minds issue that you were talking about as far as the religious fervor that surrounds this issue.
Mhm.
And we're trying to just turn that temperature down in just the everyday neighborhoods and communities in Texas. Because, as much as we are making headway at the Capitol, that is not indicative of real life Texas, right?
Right. Yeah. And that program is flourishing, and it allows us to continue to do the work, allows me to continue to do the work that I do because I have ground support. I have an army of people who are ready to fire off emails, phone calls, come to the Capitol, knock doors. So it's important to have hands and feet, and it's important to have a big mouth.
Well, no shortage there for myself. All right. So, how do people get involved? Those that are in Texas who are really feeling this call to action, they're wanting to fight on the policy side. How do they get involved with you guys?
We have a TexansForVaccineChoice.com is our website. You can do a slash subscribe and fill out our little subscribe form. We do ask for a little bit of information so that if there is a geographical action alert, say your state representative is poised to take a bad vote, we will send out a very hyper local action alert to those people. And then, just sign up. We are still relatively censored on social media. And so we really try to make our emails very meaty. We send out one newsletter a week. We do not spam your inboxes with 5 emails a day or anything. And so we try to make our weekly newsletter very meaty, content heavy, and everything you need to know to know what's happening in the medical liberty front in Texas. And during session, or if there is, even when we're not in session, if there is a timely action alert, we will get off on that one weekly email. Of course, during session, we would probably send out a couple emails a week with like a call these people today things. But yeah, signing up is really the best way. If somebody is interested in that outreach program that I mentioned, you can find that under the Get Involved tab at TexansForVaccineChoice.com.
Perfect. And y'all have an event coming up with one of my favorite people on the planet, though I've not met him yet in person, with Erin, Siri, who has just authored the book Vaccines Amen. For those of you who are not familiar with Erin, Siri, I really advise you to listen to some of his testimony. He was involved in a hearing recently with Senator Ron Johnson. Really, really informative. But you've got him coming to Texas. So tell us about that event.
Well, it's in my backyard, so I'm excited for the event. So, no, he's coming. It's officially like a book tour event. However, he actually reached out to us and asked if we would like to host an event with him. And the answer was yes and amen. Very easy. But he will be speaking in Round Rock on November 12th. I think it's 6 p.m. You're the details lady.
Under the Get Involved tab on our website, there's an events in the drop-down menu. You can find that event on the events section of our website and buy your tickets there. There is the VIP experience does involve a signed book and a photo op and all that good stuff. General admission still gets you in and gets you a book and his keynote address as well.
Okay. So I will be there. I'm looking forward to seeing you ladies there. For those of you listening, if you are in the area, please come join us because it's going to be a lot of fun. I did mention on a more recent podcast with Kim Mack Rosenberg that I'll also be at the Children's Health Defense Conference in Austin, Texas this year. So I'm very excited about that as well.
And TFVC
All right.
will be there as well. And
Perfect.
for those that don't know who Erin Siri is, I had the honor of being in DC in May for we were executive producers on a documentary called Follow the Silenced. If you have not watched that, go to followthesilenced.com and please watch that movie. But we did a congressional screening of that documentary and it coincided with a Senate hearing on Capitol Hill. And so I was able to, tee up in the ante room with the witnesses and walk out and it was Erin Siri and Dr. McCullough and some other just heavy hitters on this, and it was just, again, talk about running the table. I almost felt sorry for the guy that Senator Blumenthal chose to represent the opposing side. And then fast forward to just last month, or maybe, I think it was in September, Erin Siri was there again to discuss this buried study that really dove into the unvaxxed, vaccinated health outcomes, a study that was essentially buried. So he has a brilliant mind. I am just always in awe of just sitting at his feet, listening to him. And he just has such a pure heart for, as far as it comes to let's just tell the truth here. And I am without any sort of just gain or anything. And I just am so thankful for his voice in this movement.
Yeah, 100%. All right, ladies. So, at the end of every podcast, I ask all of my guests 8 rapid fire questions. They're just designed to give us a little bit of insight into who you are and what makes you tick. All right, so I'll let you guys choose who wants to answer first, but here we go. Number 1, if you could choose only one natural remedy for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Strength training.
Magnesium.
Ah, nice. All right. Number 2, tell us something most people don't know about you.
I used to run a juvenile detention center in Brooklyn, New York.
Wow.
I speak Spanish.
Very cool. Yo hablo español también.
Oh, muy bien.
All right. Number 3, if I were to compile a playlist of happy music, what song would you suggest be added?
This is a tough one because I don't very much happy music. But one of my favorite songs ever is Beast of Burden by Rolling Stones. It's not a happy song, but it makes me happy.
Mm.
Michelle will testify to how like un-pop culture-y I am. But I am, to go back to, I guess, my Gen X roots, I would say just like a Cyndi Lauper, Girls Just Want to Have Fun, or Whitney Houston, I Want to Dance with Somebody, just something like that. Maybe some Shania Twain, I don't know.
Yeah, I love it. Gen X for the win, right? Okay. All right. Number 4, what's your favorite guilty pleasure?
Shopping.
I would say Saturday morning garage sales. Thrifting is my superpower. And if you need something, I joke that my mafia name would be called the Finder. So.
All right, Rebecca, next time I'm calling you.
I probably have 8 of them in my garage, whatever you need.
All right, number 5, what is the most influential book you've ever read?
The Bible?
Beyond the Bible, I would say I'm an avid reader, but a book, some books stick with you longer than others, right? And I would say probably like The Red Tent. I read that probably a decade ago. It has stuck with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. What does the word revolution mean to you?
Oh, that's a heavy one. I would say it's any movement that changes both law and culture.
I would just say fighting against tyranny.
Mm. All right. What does the word remedy mean to you?
A path to recovery.
Or a something that could even prevent disease.
And the last one, if you could impart one piece of wisdom onto our listeners, what would that be?
Listen to your gut.
You can make a difference.
Thank you, ladies, so much. Michelle Evans, Rebecca Hardy from Texans for Vaccine Choice. If y'all are listening and you are in the Texas area or anywhere, even, a short plane ride away, we would love to see you at the Night with Erin Siri or at the Children's Health Defense Conference, which we mentioned on previous podcasts with Kim Mack Rosenberg. Thank you both so much for being here. I really appreciate your time and everything that you have done for my home state. I am now a proud Texan. I'm very glad to be here. Thank y'all for listening, and we'll see y'all next time. Take care.
With hope as a guiding light, through darkest days we'll fight the night. With a whole lot of passion, with a whole lot of truth, Remedy Revolution is here for you.